In the deepest vaults of forbidden literature lies a text so disturbing that religious authorities have spent centuries ensuring you never read it. What you're about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about Noah and the world before the flood. Welcome to the shadows of biblical history, where banned books whisper truths too dangerous for Sunday sermons. Today, we venture into the forbidden chronicle known as the Book of Noah, a terrifying manuscript that was deliberately stripped from sacred scripture and buried in the darkest corners of ancient libraries. This isn't your childhood Sunday school story about a man, an ark, and some animals. This is the raw, unfiltered account of a world so corrupted that divine intervention became humanity's only hope for survival. The Book of Noah reveals horrifying details about the antediluvian era that make modern horror stories seem like bedtime tales. Why was this book banned? What secrets does it contain that were deemed too dangerous for believers to know? The answers lie within pages that describe supernatural beings corrupting human bloodlines, forbidden knowledge that poisoned civilization, and genetic abominations that stalked the earth before the Great Deluge. The Book of Noah doesn't just tell us what happened. It shows us why the flood wasn't just divine judgment, but divine mercy. When you understand what truly walked the earth in those days, when you comprehend the depth of corruption that had infected every living thing, you realize that washing the world clean wasn't cruelty, but compassion. Tonight, we unlock these forbidden chambers of knowledge. We'll explore the visions Noah received that detailed humanity's fall into supernatural corruption. We'll examine the prophecies that revealed how fallen angels had polluted the very essence of life itself. And we'll understand why religious authorities decided this knowledge was too dangerous to survive. But be warned, once you step into this forbidden territory, there's no returning to the sanitized version of biblical history. The truth waiting in these pages will forever change how you view the ancient world and the forces that nearly destroyed humanity before it could truly begin. Prepare yourself for revelations that challenge everything you thought you knew about good and evil, about the supernatural realm, and about why sometimes the most merciful act is complete annihilation. Chapter 1, The Forbidden Chronicle. Deep within the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition lies a manuscript that Western Christianity tried desperately to erase. The Book of Noah, preserved in ancient Ge'ez and fragments scattered across forgotten monasteries, contains revelations that make the canonical Genesis account seem like a gentle whisper compared to a thunderous roar. This forbidden text claims to be Noah's own testimony, dictated by divine revelation as he witnessed the final corruption of the antediluvian world. Unlike the brief biblical account that simply states mankind had become wicked, Noah's chronicle provides graphic, disturbing details about exactly what kind of wickedness had consumed the earth. According to this banned book, Noah received visions that revealed the true extent of supernatural contamination plaguing humanity. These weren't ordinary sins of lying, stealing, or murder that had angered the divine. The corruption ran far deeper, touching the very fabric of creation itself. The text describes how the Watchers, those angels assigned to observe humanity, had abandoned their heavenly post to take human women as wives. But this wasn't merely forbidden romance. It was genetic warfare against the human race. These supernatural beings possessed knowledge and abilities that weren't meant to mix with mortal flesh. Their offspring, the Nephilim, weren't just unusually large humans, as some interpret the biblical text. Noah's account describes them as abominations that defied natural law. These hybrid creatures possessed supernatural strength, insatiable appetites for violence, and an inherent hatred for pure humanity. They consumed not just food, but human flesh, drinking blood as if it were wine. The Book of Noah reveals that these giants established kingdoms built on terror and cannibalism. They taught humans forbidden arts of warfare, sorcery, and perverse sexual practices that corrupted entire civilizations. Cities became slaughterhouses, where human sacrifice fed the appetites of these hybrid rulers. But the corruption spread beyond just the Nephilim themselves. The fallen angels had shared celestial knowledge that humanity wasn't equipped to handle. They taught the secrets of metallurgy, not for tools of agriculture, but for weapons of unprecedented destruction. They revealed astronomical knowledge that led to dark forms of divination and star worship. Women learned the arts of cosmetics and seduction, not for beauty, but to participate in ritualistic corruption that bound communities to demonic influences. Men learned to forge swords and shields, transforming peaceful settlements into military strongholds where might determined right and the weak became prey for the strong. Noah's visions showed him cities where temple prostitution had replaced pure worship, where infant sacrifice had become routine religious practice, and where the distinction between human and animal had been obliterated through unnatural breeding experiments. The fallen angels had taught genetic manipulation that produced creatures neither fully human nor fully animal. The text describes how these abominations had spread across the entire earth. Every bloodline had been tainted, except for Noah's family, preserved by divine protection, specifically for the continuation of pure humanity. The flood wasn't punishment for ordinary sin. It was emergency surgery to remove a cancer that threatened to destroy human nature permanently. According to Noah's Chronicle, even the earth itself had become corrupted. Plants grew in twisted forms. Animals developed violent behaviors, unknown in their original nature, and the very ground seemed to cry out from the blood of innocents shed upon it. The natural order had been reversed, with death ruling over life and darkness overwhelming light. The book of Noah claims that in his final visions before the flood, Noah saw the true spiritual reality behind the physical corruption. Demonic principalities ruled entire nations, fallen angels walked openly among humans as kings and priests, and the boundary between heaven and earth had been shattered by rebellious celestial beings who refused to accept their assigned roles. This forbidden text explains why God's solution was so drastic. When corruption reaches the genetic level, when the very essence of humanity has been poisoned by supernatural contamination, cleansing becomes the only path to preservation. The flood wasn't mass murder, it was divine chemotherapy, destroying the cancer while protecting the healthy cells needed for recovery. These revelations explain why religious authorities found the Book of Noah too dangerous for general consumption. If believers understood the true depth of supernatural evil that had once controlled the world, they might despair of humanity's ability to resist such forces. The sanitized biblical account preserved hope, while these forbidden details revealed just how close creation had come to permanent corruption. Chapter 2. Secrets Before the Flood. The antediluvian world, described in Noah's Forbidden Chronicle, wasn't merely a place of moral decline. It was a realm where the supernatural had invaded and conquered the natural order. The secrets revealed in this banned text paint a reality so dark that ancient scribes questioned whether recording these visions might invoke divine wrath upon themselves. Noah's prophetic revelations detailed how the Watchers had systematically corrupted human civilization through the careful distribution of forbidden knowledge. This wasn't random rebellion, but organized warfare against the divine plan for humanity. Each fallen angel specialized in particular forms of corruption, working together to transform Earth into a mirror image of their own rebellion. The angel Azazel taught men to forge weapons of war. But these weren't simple swords and spears. The Book of Noah describes metallurgical techniques that produced weapons of supernatural effectiveness, blades that could pierce spiritual as well as physical beings. These weapons became objects of worship themselves, treated as sacred relics that connected their wielders to demonic power. Semjazah, the leader of the fallen Watchers, revealed the secrets of binding spells and enchantments. Humans learned to trap spiritual entities and force them into service, creating a network of demonic slavery that powered entire kingdoms. Cities rose where human rulers commanded legions of bound spirits, using supernatural labor to build monuments that defied natural engineering limitations. The fallen angel Barakajal taught astrology, but not for agricultural planning or navigation. This was dark divination that connected human consciousness directly to rebellious celestial beings. Star worship became the dominant religion of the antediluvian world, with massive temple complexes built to channel stellar influences and demonic communications. Women learned cosmetic arts from the fallen angel Gadriel, but these weren't techniques for simple beautification. The Book of Noah describes makeup and ornaments that served as ritualistic preparations for supernatural encounters. Physical appearance became a form of spiritual communication, signaling to demonic entities the level of corruption an individual had achieved. The forbidden text reveals that genetic manipulation had become commonplace in the pre-flood world. The Nephilim didn't just reproduce naturally. They conducted breeding experiments that combined human, animal, and possibly even plant characteristics. The Earth was filled with hybrid creatures that served various purposes in their twisted civilization. Some hybrids were bred for warfare, possessing the strength of wild beasts combined with human intelligence and supernatural endurance. Others were created for labor, able to work in conditions that would kill normal humans while requiring minimal food or rest. Still others were bred purely for entertainment, living toys that satisfied the increasingly perverse appetites of their hybrid masters. The Book of Noah describes cities where humans were literally farmed like livestock. The Nephilim had developed systematic approaches to human breeding, selecting for specific traits that would enhance the usefulness of their human slaves. Some were bred for physical strength, others for intellectual capacity, and some for purely aesthetic purposes. Religious practices in the antediluvian world had become completely inverted. Instead of worshiping the Creator, humans offered sacrifice to the fallen angels and their hybrid offspring. Temple complexes featured ritualistic cannibalism, where human flesh was consumed as a sacrament, connecting participants to demonic power. Child sacrifice had become routine, not just as religious ritual, but as a form of supernatural agriculture. The Book of Noah reveals that innocent blood was believed to enhance the growth of crops and the prosperity of communities. Entire generations grew up viewing the murder of children as normal agricultural practice. The fallen angels had also corrupted human sexuality beyond mere promiscuity. The forbidden text describes ritualistic sexual practices designed to produce specific types of supernatural offspring. These weren't acts of love or even lust, but calculated breeding programs aimed at creating increasingly powerful hybrid beings. Marriage itself had been abolished in many regions, replaced by breeding assignments determined by demonic calculations. Women became mere incubators for supernatural experimentation, while men were reduced to genetic donors in a system designed to eliminate pure human bloodlines entirely. The Earth's ecology had been systematically destroyed by these corruptions. Plants were genetically modified to produce narcotic effects that enhanced demonic possession. Animals were bred to be increasingly aggressive and dangerous, turning the natural world into a hostile environment where only the supernaturally enhanced could survive. Even the weather had been corrupted through fallen angelic influence. The Book of Noah describes how the Watchers had learned to manipulate atmospheric conditions, creating localized droughts or floods to punish resistant populations or reward their collaborators. Nature itself had become a weapon in their campaign against pure humanity. The Forbidden Chronicle reveals that by the time of Noah's final visions, pure humans existed only in scattered, hidden communities that lived in constant terror of discovery. The hybrid beings and their human collaborators actively hunted the remaining pure bloodlines, recognizing them as threats to their supernatural order. Chapter 3. The Watcher's Punishment. The Book of Noah's most terrifying chapters detail the divine response to supernatural rebellion and the eternal fate awaiting the fallen Watchers. These passages were considered so disturbing by early church authorities that many argued for their complete destruction rather than mere exclusion from biblical canon. According to Noah's Forbidden Chronicle, the Archangel Michael received direct orders to bind the rebellious Watchers and prepare them for eternal torment. But this wasn't simple imprisonment. It was the beginning of conscious suffering that would continue without end throughout all eternity. The text describes how Michael and his loyal angels descended to earth, with chains forged in heaven's fires, bonds that could restrain supernatural beings who possessed power beyond human comprehension. The fallen Watchers, despite their rebellion, still retained much of their original angelic strength and required divine-level force to subdue. The binding process itself was described as cosmic warfare that shook the foundations of the earth. Mountains cracked and valleys formed as supernatural forces clashed in battles that lasted for days. The hybrid offspring of the fallen Watchers attempted to defend their supernatural fathers, leading to conflicts that reduced entire civilizations to ruins. Azazel, the angel who had taught weapon making, was bound with chains that burned with eternal fire. The Book of Noah reveals that he was buried alive beneath jagged rocks in a desert place called Dudael, where he remains conscious and in agony, waiting for the final judgment, when he will be cast into the lake of fire forever. Simjaza and the other leaders of the rebellion were bound in the valleys of the earth, imprisoned in darkness until the great day of judgment. Unlike human death, where consciousness ends, these fallen beings remain fully aware of their punishment, experiencing every moment of their captivity while knowing their eternal fate has already been sealed. The forbidden text describes their psychological torment as exceeding their physical suffering. These beings had possessed knowledge of divine glory and chose to rebel against it. Now they experience constant regret and self-hatred while being unable to repent or change their fate. They exist in a state of permanent despair that makes their physical chains seem merciful by comparison. The Book of Noah reveals that the fallen watchers are forced to witness the consequences of their rebellion throughout history. They watch as humanity struggles with the corrupted nature they introduced, seeing wars, violence, and suffering that traces back to their original teaching of forbidden knowledge. Their punishment includes guilt for every evil their influence created. But perhaps most terrifying of all, the text describes how they can see the future judgment that awaits them. Unlike humans, who face death with uncertainty about what follows, the fallen watchers know exactly what eternal punishment has been prepared for them. They experience anticipatory torment, knowing that their current suffering is merely a preview of infinite agony to come. The hybrid Nephilim faced a different but equally horrific fate. Being part human, they possessed souls that could experience spiritual death. When their physical bodies were destroyed in the flood, their spirits were condemned to wander the earth as demons, forever seeking physical bodies to inhabit, but never finding permanent rest. The Book of Noah describes these demonic spirits as being driven mad by their condition. They remember their former power and glory as hybrid beings ruling over human populations, but now exist as incorporeal entities dependent on possession or influence for any interaction with the physical world. These demons retain the violent nature of their Nephilim origins, but lack the physical strength they once possessed. This creates a state of permanent frustration that drives them to seek increasingly creative ways to corrupt and destroy human beings. Their hatred for pure humanity has only intensified through centuries of spiritual imprisonment. The Forbidden Chronicle reveals that Michael was also commanded to destroy all traces of the forbidden knowledge that the Watchers had shared with humanity. Sacred texts containing supernatural secrets were burned, weapons forged with angelic knowledge were melted down, and architectural monuments built with fallen angel assistance were demolished. However, the Book of Noah acknowledges that some forbidden knowledge survived in hidden forms. Certain bloodlines retained genetic memories of supernatural techniques, and some human collaborators had memorized critical information before the purge began. This explains why occult practices and supernatural corruption reappeared after the flood, despite the destruction of the antediluvian world. The text warns that the bound watchers continue to influence human affairs through dreams, visions, and spiritual communication with those who seek forbidden knowledge. Though physically restrained, their minds remain active and malevolent, constantly seeking opportunities to corrupt humanity through indirect means. The most chilling aspect of their punishment is its permanence. Unlike human suffering, which ends in death, or even human sin, which can be forgiven through repentance, the Watchers' rebellion has sealed their fate irrevocably. They chose their path with full knowledge of the consequences, and divine justice demands they experience those consequences eternally. The Book of Noah concludes this section by revealing that the final judgment will make their current punishment seem merciful by comparison. When the end times arrive, these fallen beings will be cast into the lake of fire, prepared specifically for them, where their consciousness will remain intact throughout endless torment that exceeds human ability to comprehend or describe. Chapter 4. Why this book was buried. The suppression of Noah's Forbidden Chronicle represents one of history's most successful campaigns of religious censorship. Understanding why early church authorities worked so desperately to bury this text reveals the dangerous implications its contents posed to established theological doctrines and social stability. The primary threat came from the book's graphic depiction of supernatural evil infiltrating the physical world. Early Christian communities were already struggling with persecution from Roman authorities and needed messages of hope and divine protection. Noah's detailed descriptions of fallen angels corrupting entire civilizations suggested that demonic forces could achieve near total victory over humanity, a concept that undermined faith in divine sovereignty. Church fathers recognized that widespread knowledge of these revelations could lead to despair rather than devotion. If believers understood how completely the antediluvian world had been corrupted by supernatural forces, they might conclude that similar corruption was inevitable in their own time. The sanitized Genesis account preserved hope, while Noah's chronicle revealed humanity's terrifying vulnerability to demonic influence. Early church councils specifically debated whether texts containing such detailed descriptions of angelic warfare should be preserved even in restricted libraries. Many argued that any written record of these revelations posed unacceptable risks, regardless of who had access to them. Church authorities recognized that this democratization of supernatural experience could undermine their role as interpreters of divine will. If individuals could receive direct revelations about cosmic history and spiritual realities, the institutional church's monopoly on religious truth would be broken. The text's warnings about genetic corruption surviving the flood also posed uncomfortable questions about contemporary bloodlines. If some humans carried genetic memories of forbidden knowledge, how could church authorities identify and deal with such individuals? The implications for persecution and discrimination were enormous. The book's description of hybrid beings ruling over pure humans could easily be interpreted as coded criticism of contemporary political structures. If rulers possessed supernatural advantages over their subjects, questions about legitimacy and resistance would naturally arise. Religious authorities concluded that such knowledge was too dangerous for general distribution and too disturbing for preservation, even in restricted form. The systematic campaign to eliminate Noah's chronicle from both Jewish and Christian traditions represents recognition that some truths are too terrifying for human minds to bear safely. The few fragments that survived did so only in the most isolated communities, preserved by groups who believed that hiding truth was more dangerous than revealing it. These remnants continue to surface occasionally, reminding us that the boundary between revelation and forbidden knowledge remains as controversial today as it was centuries ago.